go up to Utica, New York. Last week, we had a decision in Robert Brooks's case. I'm not sure if the both of you got the opportunity to follow, but we're going to talk about that. And I want to play a video here that we can go through of his name is JB Nicholas. He works for the Freelance Reporter. And congratulations, JB. Your work in Robert Brooks's case just made it into the October edition of the New Yorker, which is phenomenal. So his work in that case got cited in the New Yorker. But I want to go to this. I know Todd and I have talked about, Nan has talked about this, and I'm severely disappointed because the thing that really irks me, and I did this all last week when we found out about the verdict here. So Kingsley has been found guilty, and Gallagher and now the other name's gonna slip my mind. Gallagher and let's
It
so
slips
many
mine
names.
too.
Yeah. Not Walrath, because there's so many people involved. I'll get to it here, and I do apologize, everybody. I've had a lot of names on my mind today, and maybe the chat can help me out here. But I've been very disappointed because 2 get acquitted and 1 gets found guilty. And the thing that irks me about this is that I literally went back through the body cam footage and I wanted to listen. Kiefer, thank you, AB. Thank you. I went back, Todd, and I listened to JB Nicholas breakdown. We went through that, and I wanted to just focus on those 3 names because they're the CEOs that took this to trial. And I'll be honest with you, those names were brought up the most. They were pointed out the most in this video, along with Farina and Anzalone. Their hands were really deep in this as well. But I don't understand it. What did the jury see or not see here? 2 acquitted and 1 found guilty. This is a major, in my opinion, travesty of justice to the Brooks family. And it now sets the tone. And maybe both of you will agree with me here. It now sets the tone that you're basically telling the New York justice system that it's okay to pummel a man to death, and it's okay to not speak up, to not step in and not speak up. I'm going to default. I'll go to Nan first. Nan, your thoughts on this, and then we'll play basically what the outside or inside perspective, JB Nicholas, what he felt about these acquittals and what was going on in that courtroom. Go ahead, Nan.
This is a classic, what I call a split verdict. And I noticed it when I noticed it through the trial, and when the closing arguments on the Robert Brooks case were coming down, that you had defense attorneys trying to draw lines of distinction between the level of quote unquote misconduct or responsibility of the different correction officers. And at the time, I remember being in your chat on some of your discussions of this case, Brian, and I kept saying it's never a good thing when a defense attorney is like throwing other defendants under the bus, the co-defendants. But it does seem to me by this split verdict that this jury just found that 2 of the individuals were not criminally culpable. I'm disappointed. I do think that does send an indirect message to the state of New York, to other correction officers, and frankly to juries, future jurists, that they can split the baby on this and decide that, well, hey, we're gonna really only impose criminal liability on the ultimately highest culpable party. I think in this case, the prosecutor probably should have charged lesser charges against the other co-defendants. And I don't specifically remember what other lesser charges could have been available to that prosecutor.
Yeah, it was gang assault, second-degree murder, and manslaughter were the major charges.
Yeah, like I feel like there are times where and I've never served as a prosecutor, only a criminal defense attorney, but I feel like there are times when a prosecutor has to use a critical eye and make a determination, where can I get a conviction if I have in good faith the evidence that I need to get that conviction? do I want to hold them all criminally culpable under the same level? But I do think that ultimately the verdict to me is a bit confused. Someone just put in your chat, it seemed a bit senseless, and I agree with that. In fact, I didn't know about the verdict because I was traveling, and you and I talked about it, and I went, "Oh my God, why did that
Yeah.
happen?" But ultimately, the gentleman who was convicted, that is the right result.
Kingsley. Yeah,
Kingsley,
Kingsley.
that's the right result. I'm happy to see that, but to be Robert Brooks's loved ones, they're probably left defeated and they're feeling that they were disserved by the prosecution in this matter.
Before I go to Todd, a couple of things. Do you think that trying them all together kind of screwed this up as well too? Do you think they should have been tried individually?
So I want to apologize for my dog barking while I'm answering.
Okay.
Normally I hit mute. So she's chiming in. She thinks my dog Roselle actually thinks that they should have been tried separately if they
Separately.
wanted to get the convictions,
Okay.
all for the same charge. However, it's not what we call economically feasible to do that. I mean, we saw that recently in the Adelson case involving the death of Dan Markel down in Florida, where the prosecution down in Tallahassee has just been knocking out the culpable parties one by one by one by one.
Yeah.
But for judicial economy and to save taxpayer dollars and to just economize the effort that has to be done by a
Right.
prosecution, you do try them. You tend to try them all at once. The problem is the prosecution, by doing that in Robert Brooks's matter, created this warm environment for everyone to kind of point the finger at the other person. And
Mm,
for some reason, this jury was sympathetic to that and
so
found
crazy.
shades of
Disgusting.
culpability.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Todd, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Brian, I thought for sure there were going to be more guilties out of this based on, the video evidence, what we all witnessed. There are times where I think a jury will look at all of the parties in this at trial, and some may have taken the position, well, they lost their job, and that was enough of a punishment. Um, and they kind of fall and settle on other factors. And again, I don't agree with that approach, but you never know what a jury is going to come back with. But when I see something where two acquitted, one based on the video evidence, two acquitted, one found guilty of the charges, that just something went on in that jury pool room for them to come up with that.
Oh, we're gonna get to that in a second. We're gonna get
Mhm.
to that because JB Nicholas is gonna break this all down for us, and I'm gonna pull that video up in a second. I have a question here. Why do you think this was never charged as a hate crime?
Hmm. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'd have to look at the specific statute in New York to better answer it, but
Mm,
it is a decision of the prosecution. If they decided that looking at the evidence that they had at the time, that it was not in any way motivated by some protected class that Robert Brooks fell into, then the prosecution made a reasoned decision,
mm,
whether I agree with it or not to pursue that.
yeah,
But I think
interesting.
there is enough evidence to show that there probably was enough to satisfy the hate crime statute itself. That's a good question.
Yeah, same here. I agree, man. Trying to find those elements enough to stick to the charges.
Could have been
Um,
tough. Yeah,
yeah, it might have been a bit of a reach for them.
They
yeah.
have to, off the top of my head, the prosecution would have to prove that what happened to Robert Brooks was specifically tied to his ethnicity, his
Right.
race, any of that. You see that more in circumstances where there's someone perhaps of a certain sexual orientation or race, where it is very apparent from the wrongdoing that that is the reason why the wrongdoing happened. If it's too extrapolated or tenuous, a prosecutor would likely be justified in not making that decision to pursue that.
Yeah, and I just want to give a lot of credit to Special Prosecutor Fitzpatrick. He did such a great job. He was so passionate about this case. And I mean, there were even times like in his delivery that he got emotional. And, this was probably a very emotional case for him. He gave it his all. And I don't want him to think that he lost. Yeah, you lost by that jury, but you didn't lose by getting this information out and showing what happens behind the walls. I've said this
Right.
before. Robert Brooks, committed a crime and he was in there doing his time. And we don't know what his life would have been when he was scheduled to be released in 2026. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what Robert Brooks's life. We'll never have that opportunity to know what Robert Brooks's life is now because he was killed. But who knows? He could have gotten out, rehabilitated himself, and became a productive member of society. From what I see and what I've seen in the supportive videos and the family speaking up, looks like he had a really good support system behind him. And it's a damn shame that that this happened to him. It's tragic. It's awful. It's disgusting. And I hope that these COs have to live with this essentially for the rest of their lives, and it never escapes their conscious ever within a day. I
Yeah.
hope that they have to hear the name in their head that rings Robert Brooks on a day-by-day, minute, second basis for the rest of their lives. And I'll just even flip this. I mean, now look at the guys that took plea. Do you think they're sitting there saying, gee, we should have took our chances with a jury? And I
Yeah.
don't want to think of that way, but that is another angle here that we could talk about.
I'm sure that's happening. And no one ever knows what a jury is going to
You
do.
don't.
In criminal and civil actions, every attorney defending a defendant will have a conversation, and we'll talk to our client and say, you don't know what a jury's going to do. It depends on so many factors, and sometimes those factors can be as simple as what is the mood of certain jurors on a particular day, or did they like the shoes that you wore?
Right.
So all of those things can be extremely arbitrary in what weighs on a jury's mind. So it is a gamble. Many times I've had to sit clients down and say, I don't like how this is looking. Even as the trial has gone on, I'll say, I don't love the expressions of these jurors. You might want to consider pleading if it's still on the table. But yes, I think there are probably those who pled saying maybe I should have taken my chances. You just never know. It's like literally going to Vegas and taking your chances at the craps table.
It's very true. Joy is asking, did you see AJ trying to get Commissioner Cox on the Brady list? Yes. If you back up probably about 15 minutes, you can catch that segment. We just did a segment on it. Please back up. You can watch it. If not, you can watch it after the show. We give you our thoughts on that as well too. Okay, let's hear JB Nicholas from freelancenews.org. You can go over and subscribe to his channel on YouTube. He's been phenomenal. He's done some spots on Duty Ron about this case. He just got his work recognized in the New Yorker, and we'll play this and we'll get kind of his take on what he thought happened with that jury.
Yesterday in Utica, New York, one state prison guard was convicted of murder and 2 were acquitted for killing Robert Brooks at the Marcy Correctional Facility last December 9th, 2024. I'm JB Nicholas, and I'm a journalist who covered the trial for the freelancenews.org, my news website. I want to talk about the irregularities that I saw throughout this trial that I think infected the fairness of it and led to the acquittal of these 2 officers of murder. So the first irregularity that I witnessed during the trial was the defense lawyers were allowed to make a number of arguments that were based on evidence that was not in the record or didn't exist at all. And some of them can fairly be characterized as straight up lies and disinformation that the defense lawyers, the lawyers for Kiefer, Kingsley, and Gallagher were allowed to spew to the jury without objection from the prosecution and without correction from the trial judge, who was Robert Bauer, a former Oneida County prosecutor. So I'll give you an example. In one of their arguments to the jury, David Longaretta, the lawyer for Nicholas Kiefer, argued that when Farina stuffed a rag down Brooks's throat while he was torturing him before he killed him at the Marcy Correctional Facility. Longaretta argued to the jury that he was just wiping Brooks's face with the rag. Now, everybody knows, just based on looking at the video, that that's false. But Longaretta was allowed to make this comment without any evidence whatsoever in the record. And similarly, all the defense attorneys argued that Marcy was a dangerous place. And it was so dangerous that these, powder puff snowflake guards, just patently outrageous, needed to protect themselves from a handcuffed prisoner who was 145 pounds, 5'7", and handcuffed behind his back. So there was no evidence put in the record about how dangerous Marcy was, a medium security prison compared to other prisons. Now, let's compare that, for example, with a trial that's going on right now in Brooklyn of a guard, a CO, a federal correction officer who chased a guy through the Brooklyn streets who he thought was trying to help smuggle contraband into the jail. So he actually shot at the car by the Brooklyn Bridge, and he's on trial in federal court. And the defense attorneys in that trial tried to submit this evidence that the jail in Brooklyn was insane. And, you can't divorce that reality from the perception of this officer. And that got squashed right away by the trial judge. But in this case, in Brooks's case, Judge Bauer allowed these attorneys to make these false arguments without any basis in the record. So that's one of the main, this happened repeatedly with other issues. I'm just giving you an example. So that's one of the main irregularities that I witnessed in the Robert Brooks murder trial. Now, the second irregularity that I witnessed occurred on the first day of jury deliberations last Wednesday. So the judge instructed the jury on the law and let them retire for deliberations for about a half hour from 4 to 4:30 last Wednesday. And after 4:30, while the jurors were leaving, before the jurors, let me just back up a little bit. Before jurors in a criminal case leave for the day, the judge instructs them not to discuss the case with each other or anybody else. Deliberations have to happen in the jury room for a number of reasons, and they can't be having these extracurricular deliberations, right? So they're instructed not to talk about the case with anybody else. But yet, here we are on the first day of jury deliberations in the parking lot, as 3 jurors are walking to their cars, they're talking about the case.
What the fuck? Sorry for my language. What the fuck?
This is unbelievable. This is truly unbelievable. I don't know how there is not a mistrial at this point. That's so improper.
On the first day of deliberation, they were talking.
And by the way, the first part of what he was talking about, where there was misinformation or outright lies being presented to a jury and not corrected or objected to by the prosecution or the judge, who both are empowered to do so, that happens all the time. I'm not saying it's appropriate. I'm just saying that happens all the time. And one of the things that I think people who are not lawyers often don't appreciate is that even when you're not the one questioning, which is a lot of work on its own, well, you've got to be listening. Trials are exhausting. You have to listen to every question, every answer. You can't be reading off of an outline and not listening to the testimony that's coming your way. You have to listen to what your adversary is asking of that particular witness and make sure that it's not objectionable. So I'm really bothered that type of misinformation, specifically the example that he gave with the wiping of the face with a rag. I mean, that is not at all what was in the record. And unfortunately, because no one objected, there's no grounds for any appeal on that. So it's a lot of work to be zealously defending or prosecuting a case. I'm really liking his reporting, and it is unheard of that his reporting would have made its way into the New Yorker.
Yeah,
I'm so
that's
proud of him.
Yeah.
Did you think maybe because the video had to be entered into as evidence that the video would speak for itself? And that,
Yes.
Well, yeah, and this is a good point too I want to make, Todd, and I'm glad that you said that. You got to think there was no audio to the video, so they're not getting the narration like we got from JB. JB broke this down, and I think that if they would have had that audio and had the context as what's going on, you know, when we listen to the video, it probably would have aided as to what was going on, and that's what I was talking about. I went through his video and I said, all right, everybody, the names we want to concentrate on: Kingsley, Kiefer, Gallagher. How many times are they going to say this? And they were said multiple times over and over again, because he pointed out the parts and the things that they were doing in that video. And maybe the jury just looked at this and really just malazed over it and was only really concentrating on the key people that were up in the front, you know, because we saw Farina. Farina was the one that was stomping, you know, jabbed the rag down his throat, stomped Brooks in the testicles, was pulverizing him multiple times, and then ultimately was one of the ones, I believe, that took him to the back room and hung him by his neck, and ultimately that's what killed him. But maybe that's really what the jury was focused. I don't know. It's just weird, you know.
It's very upsetting.
Disappointing.
Walk right by me talking about the case. And not only are they talking about the case, one of the things that I heard them say was that it looks like, well, one of them said to the other two, it looks like we're going to be here till next week. Now, that's not really the substance of the trial, right? So I didn't think it was like a big thing at the time. So I didn't mention it to anybody. And besides, I kind of prefer to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? So I don't mention it. But I'm mentioning it now because it raises questions considering all the other irregularities that I saw. So what this comment tells me is immediately at the start of deliberations, there were two factions in the jury room who were firmly embedded in their beliefs. One faction believed that all the officers should be acquitted, notwithstanding the video and the evidence. Okay. And that's called jury nullification. And that's not supposed to exist in American law. A prime example of jury nullification is in the South during Jim Crow, that the killers of black men were routinely acquitted by juries, right? And this is sort of where federal prosecutions come in. You know, if a jury does this racist jury nullification, then the feds can come in and prosecute you. So that's what jury nullification is. Now, it can be used, on the other hand, it can be used for things that other people might consider good. Like, for example, selling marijuana, right? When that was illegal, sometimes people would sit on a jury and just refuse to convict for selling marijuana. So that's another example of jury nullification. It has both sides. It's a controversial issue. And so so there were two factions right off the bat. One that believed that none of them should be convicted, and once the other faction believed that there should be convictions. So these two factions were at loggerheads from the start. The third irregularity. That, what I just said about the jurors talking to each other, that the importance of that, the significance of that didn't really become clear to me until after the trial when Kingsley was convicted, but Gallagher and Kiefer were acquitted. So what that tells me is that's a classic compromise verdict. That the only way to get out of that jury room for these guys in their minds was, we're going to convict Kingsley because he's on video choking Brooks, but we're going to let these other guys go. And the reason I say I believe that to be the case now, I've done a lot of fact-based reporting. I'm an investigative journalist. Most of my reporting is all based on fact, but right now I'm going to editorialize a little bit. So this is extrapolation from the facts as I witnessed them. So, and this is based on my experience covering criminal cases going back to 1991, okay? So when the jurors come out of the courthouse after the verdict, the press typically asks them questions. There's a custom. The press can approach jurors. In New York City, they come out of the DA's office and walk to the subway. They don't have an escort or anything. Now, in Oneida County, they had an escort to the parking lot from court officers. So right away, journalists are at a disadvantage because jurors are reluctant to talk in front of the police for fear that they might make them displeasure of the police. I'm not even joking about this.
Wow.
So the first group of jurors came out, about 9 of them, and I approached them and I said, "Hey, I'm a journalist. The public is interested in how you reached your verdict. Can you explain it?" And everyone just sort of looked down at their feet. And then suddenly, a young Latina woman stopped in her tracks, turned around, and was hostile and said, "We don't want to talk to you, leave," as if she was speaking for the other jurors.
Oh.
So this hostility, and I reacted to that simply by saying, "My name is JB Nicholas. I publish the Freelance News. Please feel free to contact me at your will. I'm just going to walk with you here a little while, in case any of you change your mind." And that really upset that woman. And you would think, her being a young Latina, that maybe she had favored convicting the police. But she was really angry. And I couldn't, I've covered so many trials. I've never encountered hostility from a jury quite like this before. And so it raises a lot of flags, and I'm putting it all together now for you. So then the remainder of the jurors came out, a smaller group, 5 or 6 of them, also under escort. And this time I wasn't alone. Some other reporters had come out of the courthouse at that time and were moving to catch up with the jurors. And again, jurors were hostile. Not only would they decline to talk, they were outright hostile. One reporter from the New York Times asked a journalist, another youngish guy, red hair, looked like he might, play video games and smoke a lot of marijuana on the weekend or something. And, he asked him if he was happy with the verdict. And his answer was, "What the fuck do you think? We deliberated it." Okay.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
and it didn't help, by the way, that a court officer was intervening, and he shouldn't have intervened. And he was telling jurors, "You don't have to answer their questions." Now, if you're a juror and you're being escorted to your car by a court officer, and the court officer is saying you don't have to talk to them, that's pretty much tantamount to an order not to talk to them for the average juror who's not used to defying police authority. You see? So lot of irregularities and red flags, that I would call them, about the Robert Brooks trial and the way it was conducted. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention is that I made a request for copies of the trial exhibits.
Do it.
The trial judge, Judge Robert Bauer, the former prosecutor, and he denied the request. These are public records. Trial exhibits or public records. Courts across the nation are unanimous in their judgment that the evidentiary exhibits in a public trial are public records that the public has the right to access. Yet Judge Bauer suddenly decides that trial exhibits are government secrets.
What?
So there you have it. There's my combined report and sort of analysis. Consider this a news analysis on the Robert Brooks murder trial and what led to the verdict convicting one of the guards and acquitting 2 of them.
Wow.
All right. I need to say at the outset that I love listening to someone with a New York accent. It makes me feel I've been hearing a lot of New England accents in recent months. So, but boy, is that unbelievable. But I loved his reporting. Whether it's jurors are not supposed to talk to each other. I mean, really, the instruction they're generally given is, if you want to talk about sports or the weather, talk about sports or the weather, and that's about it. The fact that they were escorted to their vehicles post verdict and gave the attitude, or one or more of them gave the attitude in a very New York way, no less. That's inappropriate too. And it sounds like there was motivation going on in the process of deliberation and the ultimate reaching of this verdict that is questionable and suspect. And then to have the trial judge gatekeep the release of public information post-trial. That is taxpayer dollars. Those are publicly relevant information to be consumed by the public. I understand possibly if there was a time limit to be imposed, like we're not releasing, like if you recall, the evidence in the Kohberger action wasn't just released immediately. There were, and many times the identities of jurors are not released immediately post verdict. But there is no reason why this judge should refuse an order like that. So now I'm really invested in trying to figure out what's going on.
Do you think that maybe some people knew some people?
Sounds like it.
You think?
Yeah, Todd, what you thinking there? You thinking the same thing I was?
Well, I'm just going to say this. God bless to the independent journalists out there. You guys are doing yeoman's work in just exposing you know, I'm not, you know, JB was kind when he said irregularities. He was kind using that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you like to think that the symbol of our justice system, you know, that justice is blind and we're fact finders, and not the case.
Yeah.
Not
This is
always the
wild.
case.
Yeah, it's wild, it's sad, it's very disappointing. There's one more CO that goes on trial in January. Of course, I will follow up and continue to follow. I'm sure JB will be there on scene. And I was gonna have him on now. I was gonna try to get him to have him on. I want to wait until that trial concludes and then have if I can get him to come on the show, maybe we can get him on to come on with the three of us and have a conversation about what he thinks and what's going on up in there in Marcy. I'd love to hear his take on this. But phenomenal reporting. JB Nicholas, go over and subscribe to his channel. Check him out at freelancereporter.org, I believe his website was, where you can check out his reporting on the Robert Brooks case in the now October edition, which is going to be pretty much soon November, of the New Yorker. So really good stuff.